All right. Hey, everybody. Thank you for coming to my channel, The Magical Solution, here on YouTube, my private Facebook group, and of course on TikTok. Thank you guys so much for hanging. We are about to do chapters 12 through 15 of the Spirit book from Alan Kardec. And, oh man, did I just lose it? Here we go. And I definitely want to get started right away because it's a very thick situation and I want to make sure we finish on time. I don't like to take longer than an hour and a half. So if you guys are in it for the ride, let's do this. And grab yourself something to drink, grab yourself something to relax, dim the lights, get yourself comfortable, and let's do it. So this chapter is called Spirit Life. And the subjects that are going to be covered in this chapter are errant spirits, transitional worlds, perceptions, sensations, and suffering of spirits, theoretical essay on the sensation of spirits, the choice of trials, relationships beyond the grave, sympathies and antipathies among spirits and eternal halves, the remembrance of corporal existence, and the commemoration of the dead / funerals. All right. Hey, Deborah, what's up, girl? So glad you're here. All right, let's do it. So for those of you who have not sat in on one of these before, just know that Alan Kardec, he is a scientist, he's a teacher, he is someone who took this book or did the groundwork of basically interviewing mediums. That's how he wrote this book. So it kind of comes across almost like a dialogue where he'll ask a question and then the spirit will answer it, and it just kind of goes back and forth. And then once in a while he'll kind of throw in his own theories and kind of write a passage of what he thinks the whole culmination of the conversation was about. So very interesting stuff. Let's get to it. So, errant spirits. Hey, Jenny. Question 223. Does the soul reincarnate immediately after separation from the body? Sometimes it reincarnates immediately, but most often after an interval of longer or shorter duration, one more highly evolved worlds, reincarnation is almost always immediate. Since the corporal matter of those worlds is less coarse, an incarnate spirit enjoys nearly all of its spiritual faculties. Its normal state is the same as that of your lucid subliminalists. Ooh, 224. What becomes of the soul during the intervals between incarnations? It becomes an errant spirit, aspiring to and awaiting a new destiny. How long may such an interval last? From a few hours to thousands of centuries. Strictly speaking, there is no outside limit assigned to an errant state. It may last for a very long time, but never forever. Sooner or later, a spirit always has the opportunity to begin another existence, which serves for the purification of its previous ones. Does the length of the interval depend on the spirit's own will, or can it be imposed as an expiation? It is a consequence of its free will. Spirits know full well what they are doing in prolonging it, but for some reason, extending it is also punishment inflicted by God. Others ask it to be extended in order to pursue studies that cannot be done productively except in the spirit state. Question 225. Is the errant state in and of itself an indication of spirits who are less evolved? No. Since there are errant spirits of every degree, incarnation is the state that is transitory, as we have already stated. In their normal state, spirits are disengaged from matter. 226. Could we say that all spirits who are not incarnate are errant? Those who must reincarnate, yes. But the pure spirits who have reached perfection are not errant. Their state is definitive. Regarding their innermost qualities, spirits belong to different orders or degrees, though through which they pass successively as they purify themselves. Regarding their state as spirits, they may be incarnate, that is, connected to a body, errant, that is, disconnected from the material body, while awaiting a new incarnation in order to improve themselves, or pure, that is, perfected and having no further need of an incarnation. 227. How do errant spirits learn? Since it can hardly be in the same way for as like the way that we learn. They study their past and seek ways to evolve. They watch and observe what is going on in the realms through which they pass. They listen to the discourse of the enlightened individuals and the counsels of spirits who are more evolved than they are. And this provides them with ideas that they do not yet possess. 228. Do spirits retain any of the human passions? Upon losing their corporal envelope, high order spirits leave base passions behind and retain only the ideals of the good. But low order ones retain their passions, otherwise, they would belong to the first order. 229. When they leave the earth behind, why don't spirits abandon their base passions since they are able to see the trouble they can cause? On your world, there are persons who are excessively jealous, for instance. Do you believe they will lose that defect upon leaving? After they leave the earth, since they are not entirely freed from matter, especially those who have displayed strong passions, they retain a sort of atmosphere around them that is infused with all of their bad qualities. They only occasionally glimpse the truth so as to have the moral path revealed to them. 230. Can a spirit progress while in the errant state? It may improve itself a great deal. It always depends on its own will and desire. However, it puts its newly acquired ideas into practice only during corporal life. 231. Are errant spirits happy or unhappy? Their degree of happiness or unhappiness depends on what they have merited. They either suffer from the passions whose essence they have retained, or they are happy in according to their degree of dematerialization. In the errant state, a spirit realizes what it lacks in order to be happier. Thus, it searches for the means to attain it. However, it is not always permitted to reincarnate when it wants to. This in itself is a punishment. 232. While in the errant state, can spirits visit other worlds? That depends. When the spirit leaves the body, it is still not completely disconnected from matter. Hence, it still belongs to the world on which it has lived, or to one of the same degree, unless it has progressed sufficiently during its lifetime. Progression is the purpose to which it must hold, for it will never perfect itself unless it progresses. Nevertheless, it may go to certain more highly evolved worlds, but as an outsider, it can only get glimpses of such worlds, and these glimpses are what drive it to improve itself so that it may become worthy of the happiness enjoyed on them and to be able to inhabit them later. 233. Do spirits who are already purified ever go to less evolved worlds? They frequently do, in order to help such worlds progress. Without these spirits, these worlds would be left to themselves without guides to direct them. Kind of like earthbound angels, you know what I mean? People who come to this earth to help others, like gurus and enlightened humans and things like that. Transitional worlds. We're on that subject now. 234. 234. As some have stated, are there worlds that serve as layovers and resting places for errant spirits? Yes. There are worlds that are intended particularly for errant beings, worlds that they may temporarily inhabit, a type of campsite, a place where they can repose during a very long errant state, a state that is always somewhat wearisome. These are intermediary positions between worlds and are graded according to the nature of the spirits who have access to them, and where they will enjoy a greater or lesser sense of well being. Can spirits who occupy such worlds leave whenever they wish? Yes. Spirits who temporarily inhabit those worlds can leave them to follow their destiny. Imagine them to be like migrating birds that land on an island in order to regain their strength before continuing on their way. 235. Do spirits progress during their layovers on these transitory worlds? Certainly. Those who gather on them do so with the purpose of educating themselves in order to more easily obtain permission to go to better and better places until they reach the position of the elect. 236. Due to their special nature, are these transitional worlds destined forever to be layovers for errant spirits? No. Their function is only temporary. Are they inhabited by corporal beings at the same time? No. Their surface is barren. Those who inhabit them do not need anything. Is this barrenness permanent, and is it connected to their special nature? No. Their barrenness is only transitory. Then are these worlds destitute of natural beauties? Their nature is expressed in the beauties of infinite space, which are no less admirable than what you call natural ones. Since the state of these worlds is transitory, will the earth be among them someday? It already has been. At what period? During its formation. Nothing in nature is useless. Each thing has its purpose, its its destination. There is no empty space. Everything is inhabited and life expands itself everywhere. Thus, during the long series of ages that elapsed before the appearance of humankind on Earth, during the long periods of transition attested to by the geological layers, and even before the formation of the first organic beings upon the formless mass, there was no absence of life in that arid chaos in which the elements were mixed together. Beings who do not have our needs or our physical sensations found a refuge there. Even in that imperfect state, God willed for it to be useful for something. So, who would dare say that among the billions of worlds that spin through this immensity of space, only one of the smallest, lost in the crowd, had the exclusive privilege of being populated? What would be the usefulness of all the others? Could God have made them merely as entertainment for our eyes? Such is an absurd presumption, incompatible with the wisdom that shines in all of God's work, and unacceptable if we consider all those that we cannot see. No one can deny that. In this notion of worlds, which are still unsuitable for material life, which are nevertheless populated with beings appropriate for the conditions on them, there is something grand and sublime, where perhaps we may find the solution to more than one problem. We are now on the subject of perceptions, sensations, and sufferings of spirits. 237. Once in the world of spirits, does the soul still have the perception it had in this life? Yes. Others, yes. And others that it did not have because its body was like a veil that obscured them. That was a weird sentence. Sorry, guys. Intelligence is a natural attribute of the spirit, but it is expressed more freely when it is unshackled. 238. Are the perceptions and understandings of spirit unlimited? Like in other worlds, do they know everything? The nearer they approach perfection, the more they know. If they are high order spirits, they know much, and low order spirits are more or less ignorant on all subjects. 239. Do spirits comprehend the beginning of things? Well, that depends on how evolved and purified they are. Low order spirits do not know any more than humans. 240. Do spirits perceive time as we do? No. And that is what causes you to misunderstand us when it comes to setting dates or epochs. epics. Sorry. Spirits live outside of time as we know it. For them, duration of time does not exist, so to speak. The centuries that are so long to us are to them only instants that disappear into eternity, in the same way that the unevenness of the ground would fade and disappear to someone up in space. I'm going to turn on this light because oh, there we go. Because I can't see. Question 241. Do spirits have more correct and precise ideas of the present than we do? More or so. Just as someone who sees clearly has a more correct idea of things than a blind person, spirits see what you do not see, and they judge differently than you. But once again, it depends on how evolved they are. 242. How do spirits have knowledge about the past? In such knowledge, is such knowledge unlimited for them? When we concern ourselves with it, the past is present, precisely in the same way you remember something that has impressed you during your exile. However, since we are no longer hampered by the material veil that clouds your minds, we remember things that have disappeared from your memory. Spirits, however, do not know about everything, especially their own creation. Oh, guys, I have a tickle in my throat. 243. Do spirits know the future? Again, it depends on how purified they are. Frequently, they may glimpse it, but they do not always have permission to reveal it. When they do see it, it appears to them to be the present. A spirit sees the future more clearly the more it approaches God. After death, the soul sees and takes in its past migrations at a glance, but it cannot see what God has in store for it. For that, it is necessary for it to have become one with God after many lives. Do spirits who have reached perfection possess complete knowledge of the future? Complete is not the right term because God alone is sovereign. No one can equal God. Do spirits see God? Only high order spirits see and understand God. Low order spirits feel and intuit God. When a low order spirit says that a thing is forbidden or permitted to it by God, how does it know that the order has actually come from God? It does not see God, but senses the divine sovereignty. And when something must not be done, or when a word must not be spoken, it receives a sort of intuition, a secret warning, which keeps it from proceeding. Don't you yourselves have presentiments that are like secret warnings to do or not do something? The same happens with us, but to a higher degree. You should understand that since the essence of spirit is more subtle than yours, we can more easily receive divine warnings. Is the order transmitted by God directly or through other spirits? It does not come from God directly, because to communicate with God directly, one must deserve it. God transmits divine orders through spirits that are more evolved in purification and instruction. 245. Is spirit's sight circumscribed as it is in the corporal beings? No. It resides within the entire spirit. 246. Do spirits need light in order to see? They see with their own light, without the need for outside light. There is no darkness for them except that in which they may find themselves due to expiation. 247. Do spirits need to move about in order to see in two different places? For instance, can they see what is happening simultaneously in two hemispheres of the globe? Since spirits travel at the speed of thought, we can say that they see everywhere all at once. Their thought can radiate and be directed to many points at the same time, but this faculty depends on their purity. The less pure they are, the more limited their sight. Only the high order spirits can see everything as a whole. Among spirits, the faculty of sight is inherent to their nature and permeates their whole being like light in a luminous object. It is a type of universal lucidity, extending to everything, simultaneously embracing space, time, and things, and for which there is no darkness or material obstacles. One should understand that it must be this way because in human beings sight functions through an organ that receives the light. Thus, without light, they remain in darkness. In spirits, however, since the faculty of sight is inherent attribute independent of any outside agent, sight does not depend on light. 248. Do spirits see things as distinctively as we do? More distinctively, for their sight penetrates what yours cannot. Nothing obscures it. 249. Do spirits perceive sounds? Yes. They also perceive those that your limited senses cannot. Is the hearing faculty like that of sight in their whole being? All perceptions are attributes of the spirit and are part of its being. When it is clothed with a material body, perceptions only arrive through organic channels. In that state of freedom, however, they are no longer localized. Did you guys get that? Crazy. 250. Since the perceptions are attributes of the spirit itself, can it stop using them? A spirit only sees and hears what it wants to. At least this is generally the case, especially for more evolved spirits, because less evolved ones frequently must hear and see what may be useful for their improvement, whether they want to or not. 251. Are spirits sensitive to music? Do you mean your music? What is that kind of music when compared to celestial music? That harmony of which nothing on earth can give you an idea. One is to the other what the primitive chant is when compared with a soft melody. Nevertheless, ordinary spirits may take a certain pleasure in listening to your music because they are not yet able to appreciate anything more sublime. For spirits, music has infinite charm due to their highly developed sensitive qualities. Of course, I'm referring to celestial music, which is everything the spiritual imagination can conceive of as the most beautiful and delicate of all. 252. Are spirits sensitive to the beauties of nature? The beauties of nature on different globes are so diverse that one is far from knowing about all of them. Yes, they are sensitive to them according to their aptitudes for appreciating and comprehending them. Evolved spirits enjoy the beauties of the whole before which the beauties of detail fade, so to speak. 253. Do spirits experience our physical needs and sufferings? They know about them, for they have endured them, but they do not experience them physically like you do, because they're spirits. 254. Do spirits feel fatigue and have a need for rest? They cannot feel fatigue as you understand it, and therefore they do not need corporal rest, because they do not possess organs in which the energies must be restored. However, spirits do rest, meaning they do not remain in a state of constant activity. They do not act in a physical way because their action is entirely intellectual and their rest is entirely mental. There are moments when their thought decreases in activity and is no longer directed towards any object in particular. This is true repose for them, but it cannot be compared to that of the body. The kind of fatigue that spirits can experience is in proportion to how evolved they are. The more purified they are, the less rest they need. 255. When a spirit says that it is suffering, what is the nature of such suffering? Mental anguish, which tortures it more acutely than physical suffering. 256. Why do some spirits complain about the cold or the heat? It is a remembrance of what they suffered during their life, a feeling as painful as the reality itself. Frequently, they use this expression, for lack of a better one, to express their situation. When they remember their body, they express a sensation similar to when you take off a heavy coat. Immediately afterwards, you continue to feel its weight on your shoulders. We're now on the subject of theoretical essay on sensation in spirits. So it's going to be a question that he poses. They're going to answer it, but then he's going to kind of go into like a whole written dialogue of, his summation of the whole thing. So 257. The body is the instrument of pain, if not its primary cause, at least its immediate cause. The soul has the perception of such pain, and this perception is the effect. The memory that it preserves of pain can be very acute, but this does not imply any physical sensation. Actually, cold and heat cannot disorganize the soul's tissue. A soul can neither freeze nor burn. Every day, do we not see the memory of or the concern about a physical ill producing its effects, even to the extent of causing death? Now, here's the answer. We all know that individuals who have undergone an amputation feel pain in the limb that no longer exists. The limb is obviously neither the site nor the starting point of the pain. The brain itself has simply retained the impression. He's talking about phantom limbs, you guys. This is a concept, again, that's like, what, right? That wasn't a thing back then, or at least there wasn't a concept for it back then. Likewise, we can assume there is something similar in the sufferings of spirits after death. An in-depth study of the perispirit, which plays such an important role in all spirit phenomenon, such as vaporous or tangible apparitions, in the state of the spirit at the moment of death, in the so frequent notion that is still alive, in the frightening situations of suicide, in those who have undergone capital punishment, in those who have overindulged in material pleasures, and so many other facts, have shed light on this question, providing the explanations that we are presenting here in this summary. The perispirit is the link that unifies the spirit with the matter of body. It is drawn from the environment, from the universal fluid. At the same time, it contains electricity, magnetic fluid, and to a certain extent, inert matter. We could say that it is the quintessence of matter. It is the beginning of organic life, but not of mental life, because that belongs to the spirit. The perispirit is also the agent of external sensations. In the body, these sensations are localized in organs that serve as their channels. When the body is destroyed, the sensations become generalized. And that is why a spirit does not say that it suffers more in its head than in its feet. Moreover, we have to be on our guard against being confused as to the sensations of the perispirit, which have become independent of the sensations of the body. We can only take the latter as a term of comparison and not as an analogy. Freed from the body, the spirit may suffer, but this suffering is not the same as the body. However, it is not an exclusivity mental suffering either. Like remorse, because the spirit may complain of being hot or cold. Nevertheless, it suffers no more in summer than in winter. We have seen spirits pass through flames without feeling any pain, showing that temperature has no effect on them. The pain they do feel is not physical pain per se. It is a fatigue of inner sensation of which the spirit is not always aware because the pain is not localized or produced by an outside agent. It is a memory rather than a reality, but a very painful memory nonetheless. At other times, it is more than a memory, as we shall see. Experience has taught us that the perispirit disengages itself more or less slowly from the body at the moment of death. And during the first few moments, the spirit does not comprehend its situation. It does not think it has died because it feels alive. It sees its body and its side and knows that it's on its own, but does not understand why they are separate. This state lasts as long as there is a link between the body and the perispirit. A suicide once said to us, "No, I'm not dead," and then added, "Even so, I can feel the worms devouring me." Of course, the worms were not devouring the perispirit, let alone the spirit, but only the body. Since the separation between the body and the perispirit was not yet complete, there continued to be a mental repercussion that transmitted the sensation to the body. The repercussion is not quite the right term, however, since it may imply a highly physical effect. It was rather the sight of what was happening within the body itself. The perispirit was still attached, producing an illusion which was taken as real. Thus, it was not a memory of the past occurrence. Its body had never been devoured by worms during life, but a current sensation. With these elements in mind, let us see what conclusions we might draw from these facts by studying them very carefully. During life, the body receives impressions and transmits them to the spirit via the perispirit, which probably comprises to this which probably comprises what is called the neural fluid. When it is dead, the body no longer feels anything because it is neither spirit nor perispirit. When disengaged from the body, the perispirit experiences sensations, but since sensation no longer reaches it via a limited channel, it becomes generalized. Since the perispirit is only an agent of transmission, because only the spirit possesses consciousness, we may deduce that if the perispirit could exist without the perispirit would feel no more than the dead body. Likewise, if the spirit had no perispirit, it would be inaccessible to any painful sensation whatsoever, and as it is the case with completely purified spirits. We know that the more a spirit purifies itself, the more etherealized the essence of its perispirit becomes, so that material influences diminish as the spirit progresses. That is, as the perispirit becomes less coarse. You might say, however, that pleasant sensations are transmitted to the spirit via the perispirit, just as unpleasant ones are. So, if a pure spirit is inaccessible to some, it must be equally inaccessible to others. Yes, without a doubt, but only those sensations coming from the influence of the matter with which we are familiar. The sound of our instruments and the smell of our flowers make no impression whatsoever on a pure spirit, yet it enjoys inner sensations of undefinable enchantment of which we do not have the slightest idea, because they are as imperceptible to us as light is to those born blind. We know they exist, but in what way? Our knowledge ends there. We know that spirits have perception, sensation, hearing, sight, but these faculties are attributes of their whole being, not only of certain organs, as is the case with human beings. But once again, how is it so? What is what we do not know? The spirits themselves cannot explain it to us because our language was not made to express ideas that we cannot conceive of. Just as in the language of primitive tribes, there are no terms for the certain expressions of our arts and sciences and philosophical doctrines. In saying that spirits are inaccessible to the impressions of matter, we are referring to highly evolved spirits, whose etherealized envelope finds no analogy in this world. It is different with spirits whose perispirit is denser, because they perceive our sounds and our odors, but not via a limited part of their organism as when alive. We may say that molecular vibrations are felt throughout their entire being and therefore in their sensorium commune, the spirit itself, but in a different manner, and perhaps producing a different impression, which may cause a modification in their perception. They hear the sound of our voice, and yet they cannot understand us without the need of speech. The mere transmission of thought is sufficient, attesting to the fact that their mental acuity becomes greater the more dematerialized they become. The faculty of sight is independent of light. It is an essential attribute of the soul for which darkness does not exist, and shows itself to be a broader, more penetrating among those who are more purified. Therefore, the soul or spirit possesses within itself the faculty of all perceptions. During corporal life, these perceptions are obliterated by the densities of our organs. During extracorporeal life, they become increasingly liberated as the semi-material envelope becomes more and more etherealized. Drawn from the surrounding environment, the perispirit varies according to the nature of the different worlds. In passing from one world to another, spirits change this envelope as we change our clothes when we go from summer to winter or from pole to equator. When they come to visit us, the more evolved spirits assume a terrestrial perispirit, and so their perceptions are similar to those of common spirits. However, all spirits, whether highly evolved or not, only hear and feel what they want to hear and feel. Since they do not have sensorial organs, they can render their perceptions active or inactive at will. Although there is one thing they are compelled to hear, the counsels of good spirits. Their sight is always active, but they can become invisible to one another. Depending on the class they belong to, they can conceal themselves from those who are less purified, but not from those who are more purified. In the first moments after death, a spirit's sight is always dim and confused, but becomes clearer as it frees itself from the body, and it can acquire the same clarity that it had during life, including the possibility of penetrating objects that are opaque to us. As for the extension of a spirit's sight into indefinite space, into the future and the past, that depends on the spirit's degree of purity and evolution. You might say, this entire theory is not very reassuring. We had thought that, once freed from our dense envelope, the instrument of our pains, that we wouldn't suffer anymore. And now you're telling us that we can continue to suffer, whether it is one way or the other, it is suffering nonetheless. Alas, yes, we can still suffer a great deal and for a long time, but we might also no longer experience any suffering at all from the moment we leave the corporal life behind. The suffering of this world are sometimes the result of a cause outside of ourselves, but more often they result from our own volition. If we trace them back to their origin, we will see that most of them are due to the causes we could have avoided. How many ills, how many infirmities do people owe solely to their excess and ambitions? In a word, to their passions. If individuals always lived judiciously and never abused anything, if they had always had simple tastes and modest desires, they would save themselves many tribulations. The same applies to spirits. The sufferings they undergo always result from the manner in which they lived here on earth. Of course, they will no longer have gout or rheumatism, but they will experience other sufferings that are not any smaller. We have seen that such sufferings are the result of the links that still exist between the spirit and matter, that the more the spirit is disconnected from the influence of matter, that is, the more dematerialized it is, the fewer painful sensations it will suffer, starting with its present life. It depends on the spirit itself to break free from the influence of matter because it has free will and therefore the ability to choose to act or to not act. Let the spirit conquer its animal passions. Let it entertain no hatred, envy, jealousy, or pride. Let it cease to be dominated by selfishness. Let it purify itself through good sentiments. Let it practice the good. Let it not give to things of this world any more importance than they deserve. Thereby, even while in corporal envelope, it will have purified itself by detaching from matter, and when it leaves the body behind, it will not suffer any longer from its influence. The physical sufferings the spirit underwent in the past will leave no painful memory or disagreeable impressions because these affected only the body. The spirit is happy to be relieved of them, and its peaceful conscience will exempt it from all mental anguish. Concerning this subject, we have questioned many thousands of spirits who have belonged to every social class and to every position. We have studied them and every period of their spirit life, from the moment they left their body behind to purification. We have followed them step by step in that life beyond the grave in order to observe the changes that have taken place in their ideas and sensations. In this respect, the most ordinary individuals were the ones who furnished us with the most precious elements of study. We have seen that their sufferings are always related to their conduct. They must suffer the consequence, and that this new existence is a source of ineffable happiness for those who have taken the path of good. Hence, it follows that for those who suffer, it is because they have wanted to, and they have only themselves to blame in the other world as in this one. Woo, child. Mm, mm. Almost like you create your own heaven, you create your own hell. Your suffering after death is solely on you. So we're now on the subject of the choice of trials. 258. While in the errant state and before a new corporal existence, does a spirit have the awareness and foresight of what will happen to it during its new lifetime? The spirit itself chooses the kinds of trials it will undergo. Its free will consists in doing so. Then is it not God who imposes the tribulations of life on it as a chastisement? Nothing happens without God's permission, because it was God who established all the laws that govern the universe. You may as well ask why God made such and such a law instead of some other one. In giving a spirit freedom of choice, God leaves it to the entire responsibility for its acts and their consequences. Nothing stands in the way of its future. The path of the good or the path of the wrongdoing is an open choice. If the spirit succumbs to its trials, there is still the consolation that not everything is lost, because God, out of divine goodness, allows it to start over where it failed. It is necessary to distinguish between what is the work of God's will and what is the work of human will. If a danger threatens you, it is not you who have created it, but God. However, you have willingly exposed yourself to it because you saw it as a way to advance, and God has allowed it to happen. 259. As our spirit chooses the kinds of trials it will undergo, are all tribulations of life therefore foreseen and chosen by us? Not all of them. Because it cannot be said that you have chosen and foreseen every single thing that happens to you in the world down to the smallest detail. You have chosen the kinds of trials. The details are consequences of the position you have chosen, and frequently of your own actions. If a spirit chose to be born among wrongdoers, for example, it already knew what kind of temptations it would face, but it did not know how it would act in any given situation. Its actions are the products of its volition or free will. In choosing a particular path, a spirit knows it will have to endure the struggles that arises therein and knows the nature of the tribulations it will encounter, but it does not know what events await it. The details spring from circumstances and the force of things. Only the major events that will influence its destiny are foreseen. If you walk down a path full of ruts, you know you must be very cautious because you run the risk of tripping. But if you do not know when you will trip, you may be and maybe you will not trip at all if you are sufficiently on your guard. If you are walking down the sidewalk and a tile falls on your head, you must not think it was written beforehand, as it is commonly said. 260. Why would a spirit want to be born among wrongdoers? It has to be sent into the environment in which it can experience its requested trial. To this end, it must find an analogous situation. For example, in order to struggle against the instinct of thievery, it must dwell among the thieves. If there were no longer any wrongdoers on earth, would spirits not be able to find the necessary conditions for certain trials? And would that be something to regret? That is what happens on a highly evolved world, where evil has no access. Thus, only good spirits dwell on it. Use all of your efforts to ensure that the same happens as soon as possible here on earth. 261. In the trials it has to undergo to reach perfection, must a spirit experience every type of temptation possible? In other words, will it have to go through all the circumstances that can trigger pride, jealousy, greed, lust, etc.? Of course not. You should be aware of the fact that there are those who from the beginning have taken a road that has spared them many trials, but those who allow themselves to be led down the road of wrongdoing risk all its dangers. For instance, a spirit may ask for wealth and it will be given. Then, depending on its character, it may become greedy or wasteful, selfish or generous. It may indulge in all its pleasures of sensuality. This, however, does not mean that it had to experience all those tendencies fatalistically. 262. How can a spirit who at its origin is simple, ignorant, and inexperienced consciously choose an existence and be responsible for its choices? Ooh, these questions are tough for the spirit. Ooh. God compensates for its inexperience by outlining the path it should follow, as you do for a child from birth. However, as the spirit's free will develops, God gradually leaves it the freedom to choose its own way. It is, as this point, that the spirit will choose the wrongful path if it does not listen to the advice of good spirits. This is what we may call the fall of man. When a spirit enjoys its free will, does the choice of its next corporal existence always depend solely on its own volition, or can it be imposed on the spirit by God's will as an expiation? God knows how to wait. God never hastens expiation. Nevertheless, God can impose a certain existence on a spirit when, due to its impurity or ill will, it is not capable of determining what would be most useful. And when God sees that such an existence could serve for its purification and advancement, and at the same time, its expiation. 263. Do spirits make their choice immediately after death? No, because many of them believe in eternal punishment. And as we have already told you, this itself is punishment. 264. What guides a spirit in choosing the trials it wants to bear? It chooses what may serve as an expiation according to the nature of its wrongs and whatever might enable it to evolve more quickly. Some spirits may impose a life of poverty and hardship on themselves in order to try to bear it with courage. Others may wish to experience the temptations of fortune and power, which are more dangerous than poverty because of the abuse and ill use that may be made of them, and because of the base passions they encourage. Still, others may desire to be tested in the struggles they will have to bear in the contact with various vices. 265. If some spirits choose contact with a vice trial, are there others who choose it out of affinity and the desire to live in surroundings that cater to their taste, or where they may give free rein to their materialistic tendencies? Of course, there are, but only among those whose moral sense is still underdeveloped. The trial derives from this, and they must endure it for a longer time. Sooner or later, they will understand that satisfying their crude passions has deplorable consequences, which they will have to endure for a period that will seem like eternity. God may leave them in this state until they have understood their wrongs, and then ask for the means of redeeming them through profitable trials. 266. Wouldn't it be natural for a spirit to choose the least painful of trials possible? like, like why you want to pick the hard ones? For you, yes. For the spirit, no. Once it's freed itself from matter, illusion disappears and it thinks differently. Human beings subjected to the influence of carnal ideas on earth only see the painful side of their trials. That is why it seems logical that they would choose those which, from their own point of view, may coexist with material pleasures. However, in the spirit's life, they compare such crude and fleeting pleasures to the unchangeable happiness of which they get a glimpse. Then, of what importance are a few temporary hardships? A spirit may therefore choose the hardest trials and consequently the most painful existence, hoping to arrive at a better state more quickly, just as a patient often chooses the nastiest medicine in order to be healed more quickly. Explorers who aspire to having their name linked to the discovery of an unknown country do not choose a course covered with flowers. They know the dangers they will have to face, but they also know the glory awaiting them if they succeed. The doctrine of freedom to choose our lives and the trials we must undergo ceases to seem unusual when we consider the fact that when spirits are disengaged from matter, they judge things differently than we do. They foresee the goal, and the goal seems far more important than the fleeting pleasures of the world. After each existence, they see the steps they have already taken, and they understand what they yet lack in purity to reach the goal. That is the reason why they willingly submit to all the vicissitudes of corporal life, even requesting the ones that will help them arrive more quickly. Therefore, it should not be surprising to us that a spirit does not prefer a softer life. In its state of imperfection, it cannot enjoy life without suffering. It can get only a glimpse of the goal, and it is for reaching it that it seeks to improve itself. Do we not see similar examples every day? Do individuals who work part of their life without rest or respite in order to accumulate what is necessary for their well being perform a self imposed task with a view to a better future? Do not soldiers who volunteer for a perilous mission or explorers who confront dangers no less formidable in the interest of science or their own fortune willingly submit themselves to trials that will bring them honor and profit if they overcome them? What will people not submit or expose themselves to for their own gain and glory? Are not all competitive examinations voluntary trials of improving in a chosen career? No one arrives at a highly important social position in the sciences, arts, or industry without going through a series of lower positions, which in themselves are other types of trials. Human life is thus a copy of the spirit life. We find incidences of the latter in the former, only on a smaller scale. If during our time on earth we often choose the most difficult trials with a view to evolving further, why would a spirit who sees even further down the road and for whom earthly life is only a fleeting incident not choose a painful, laborious existence if it will lead toward eternal happiness? Those who say that if they could choose their existence, they would ask to be princes or millionaires are like the nearsighted who only see what they can touch. They are like gluttonous children who, when asked what they want to be when they grow up, answer, a cake baker or a candy maker. Likewise, hikers in the depths of a fog obscured valley see neither the length nor the breadth of their path, but upon reaching the top of a mountain, they behold the path they have traveled and how far they still must travel and the obstacles that they must still overcome. Hence, they choose the surest means to reach their goal. Incarnate spirits are like hikers in the depths of the valley. When freed from earthly ties, it is though they have reached the top of the mountain. For the hiker, the goal is to rest after a wearisome trek, and for the spirit, it is supreme happiness and after its trials and tribulations. All spirits say that in the errant state they search, they study, they observe in order to make their choices. Do we not have an example of this in the corporal life? Do we not often spend years searching for a career, which we end up choosing because we think it to be the most suitable of our goals? If we fail at the one, we seek another. Each career we embrace is a phase, a period of our life. We do not spend each day choosing what we will do tomorrow. So, what are its different corporeal lives to a spirit except phases, periods, and days of its spirit life, which, as we know, is the normal one? The corporal life is nothing more than transitory and temporary. 267. Can a spirit choose its next corporal life during its present one? Its desire may have an influence depending on its intention. In the spirit state, however, it frequently sees things quite differently. It is the spirit, as such, that makes the choice. But even so, it may make it during its material life because the spirit always has moments in which it is independent of the matter it inhabits. Did you hear that? Even during corporal physical life, The spirit always has moments in which it is independent of matter. Don't many individuals desire greatness and wealth, but not an expiation or a trial? Undoubtedly. It is the flesh that desires greatness and wealth in order to enjoy them, but it is the spirit that desires them in order to experience the tribulations they can cause. 268. Until it reaches the state of perfect purity, does the spirit have to constantly undergo trials? Yes, but they are not as you understand them. You call material tribulations trials. Even though it may not yet be perfect, a spirit that reaches a certain degree does not have any more trials to endure. However, it always has non suffering duties consisting in helping others to improve themselves. This will, in turn, help it evolve further. 269. Can a spirit be mistaken as to the effectiveness of a trial it chooses? It may choose one that exceeds its strength, and then it fails at it. It may also choose one that will not be profitable at all. For example, a kind of idle and useless life. In such a case, however, upon returning to the spirit world, it realizes that it has gained nothing and asks to make up for the lost time. 270. Why do persons have certain vocations or the desire to follow one career instead of another? It seems to me that you can answer this question yourself. Isn't it the result of everything that we have said about the choice of trials and the progress accomplished in the preceding existence? You could tell this spirit is kind of getting fed up with him, right? 271. When a spirit in the errant state studies the conditions that will enable it to progress, how can it possibly imagine it could do so by being born among cannibals? Spirits who have already advanced are not born among cannibals. Only those of the same nature as cannibals, or those who are even less evolved. We know that our cannibals are not at the lowest degree of the scale, and that there are worlds where brutality and ferocity have no comparison on Earth. Such spirits are therefore even less evolved than the least evolved on our world. To be among our cannibals is progress for them, just as it would be progress for our cannibals to exercise a profession among us that would require them to shed blood. If they aim no higher, it is because their moral impurity does not allow them to comprehend a more complete progress. A spirit cannot advance except gradually. It cannot simply leap over the gap between barbarity and civility. In this resides one of the necessities of reincarnation, truly showing it to be in accord with God's justice. Otherwise, what would become of the millions of beings who die every day in an ultimate state of degradation if they had no means of lifting themselves out of it? Why would God withhold from them the favors granted to others? 272. Can spirits who, from a world that is less evolved than Earth, or from a much less advanced people, such as cannibals, be born among civilized people? Yes. There are those who err by wanting to ascend too quickly, but they are out of place among you. They display habits and instincts that clash with yours. Such beings present us with the sad spectacle of ferocity in the midst of civility. Returning to live among cannibals would not be a regression for them, because it would be no more than a resumption of their proper place, even perhaps with some advantage. 273. Could a person belonging to a civilized culture reincarnate into a less advanced one as an expiation? Yes, but it would depend on the kind of expiation. Masters who had been cruel to their servant might become servants themselves and suffer the harsh treatment they used to inflict on others. Those who gave orders at one time might, in a new existence, obey those who formerly bent to their will. This would be an expiation if they used to abuse their power, and God can impose it on them. Furthermore, a good spirit may choose an influential life amidst such a culture to enable it to advance. In that case, it is a mission. Okay, guys, I'm gonna take a break here. I only read you one chapter so far. It's been an hour, and to be honest, I'm a little tired because I read for you guys yesterday as well. So I hope that that's okay. We will definitely pick up where we left off. Let's meet up again on Wednesday, January 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we will pick up on the subject of relationships beyond the grave. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me tonight. I really, really appreciate you guys. Make sure you like, you subscribe, you share, and you let people know. And if you want to catch up with the previous chapters, just go to my YouTube channel at The Magical Solution, and all the videos will be there for you guys. Have a good night and many blessings.